The history of rock and roll is often written in the ink of ego and excess, but the story of the Eagles is written in something far more complex, a collision of personalities that shouldn't have worked, yet became the gold standard of American music. At 77 years old, Joe Walsh, the clown prince of rock turned elder statesman, is finally pulling back the curtain on the man often cast as the band's enigmatic iron-fisted leader, Don Henley. While the world sees a perfectionist with a steely gaze, Walsh sees the man who held his hand through the fire. This is not a story of tabloid truth, but a deeper revelation of a brotherhood forged in the crucible of stadium lights and personal demons. In 1975, Joe Walsh was the new kid in the room, bringing a jagged Midwestern grit to the polished California harmonies of the Eagles. He famously walked into the studio with a sliding, greasy guitar riff that felt more like a street fight than a sunset. That riff would eventually become Life in the Fast Lane, but its birth was anything but harmonious. Walsh recalls that Don Henley initially looked at the riff with genuine skepticism. To Henley, the Eagles were about precision and narrative. Walsh's playing was too wild, a chaotic energy that threatened to derail the band's carefully curated aesthetic. For weeks, the two sparred. Walsh wanted a raw rock anthem, Henley wanted a cautionary tale. The truth Walsh reveals now is that this tension wasn't a sign of dislike, but the secret ingredient to their success. Henley didn't want to kill the riff, he wanted to give it a soul. By the time Glenn Frey mediated the dispute, Henley had penned lyrics about lines on the mirror and heavy metal town, turning Walsh's adrenaline-fueled melody into a biting social commentary. Walsh now admits that without Henley's relentless need for more than just a beat, the song would have been a footnote rather than a masterpiece. The most profound truth Walsh has confirmed at 77 is that his presence on stage today is a direct result of Don Henley's refusal to be a bystander. By the early 1990s, Walsh was spiraling. The whimsical party guy persona had curdled into a dangerous addiction to alcohol and drugs. He was, by his own admission, a shadow. While many in the industry were happy to let Walsh fade away as a rock casualty, Henley took a different path. During the preparations for the 1994 Hell Freezes Over tour, Henley delivered the most important line of Walsh's life. It wasn't a lyric, it was an ultimatum. Walsh reveals that Henley's toughness was actually a shield. Henley didn't just demand sobriety, he facilitated it. He checked in, he monitored the progress, and he held the line when Walsh was at his weakest. At 77, Walsh looks back at that period, not with resentment for Henley's control, but with a realization that Henley's perfectionism extended to the lives of his friends. He wouldn't settle for a broken Joe Walsh, because he knew the real Joe was still in there. When Glenn Frey passed away in 2016, the world expected the Eagles to fold. Don Henley was the first to say the band was over. Walsh, however, saw a side of Henley during those dark months that the public never glimpses. He describes a man paralyzed by the loss of his musical brother, sitting in silent studios, unable to imagine a stage without Frey. The truth Walsh confirms about this era is that Henley's supposed coldness is actually a profound, almost overwhelming sensitivity. It was Walsh and Timothy B. Schmidt who eventually nudged Henley back toward the light, suggesting that the legacy was bigger than their grief. Walsh recounts the moment Henley finally agreed to continue not for the paycheck, but as a duty to Frey's memory and his son, Deacon. Seeing Henley mentor Deacon Frey on stage brought a full-circle moment for Walsh. He saw the architect of the Eagles passing the blueprints to the next generation, ensuring that the harmonies they spent 40 years perfecting wouldn't die with their co-founder. The 1980 breakup of the Eagles is often blamed on the long night in Wrong Beach, where Glenn Frey and Don Felder famously threatened to kill each other on stage. Walsh, however, clarifies Henley's role in that era. While Henley is often portrayed as the boss who made life difficult, Walsh reveals that Henley was actually the one carrying the heaviest emotional burden. While Walsh was playing the role of the jester to cope with the pressure, Henley was the one staying up until dawn, agonizing over every syllable of every song. Walsh admits that his own behavior, often fueled by the bottle, made Henley's job nearly impossible. Don was trying to hold a cathedral together while I was trying to host a frat party, Walsh has reflected. The truth is that Henley's anger was born of a deep-seated fear that the music they had sacrificed everything for was being treated too lightly. For decades, rock historians have tried to find friction in the fact that both Henley and Walsh had high-profile relationships with Stevie Nicks. The narrative was always one of jealousy and stolen loves. At 77, Walsh laughs these rumors off, confirming that there was never a Stevie-shaped rift between them. He reveals that Henley's discretion regarding his past with Nicks was a point of respect. In the high-octane world of the 70s and 80s, where everyone's business was in the papers, Henley and Walsh maintained a code of silence regarding their personal lives. Henley's truth is that he is a man of immense privacy, someone who views his romantic history as sacred ground, not fodder for bandroom gossip. Today, the dynamic between the two is quieter, but no less intense. Walsh resides in Los Angeles, a sober radio enthusiast and veterans advocate, while Henley lives a more secluded life in Dallas. Yet when they step onto a stage together, the decades of friction melt into a singular, undeniable sound. Walsh confirms the ultimate truth about Don Henley. He is a man who loves deeply, but expresses it through discipline. Whether it's demanding 20 takes of a vocal harmony or demanding a friend go to rehab, Henley's control is his way of showing he cares. As they navigate their late 70s, the fast lane has slowed down, but the bond has only thickened. Joe Walsh's revelation isn't about exposing a villain, it's about humanizing a hero. He confirms that the Eagles weren't just a band of talented musicians, they were a family that survived itself, led by a man who was willing to be the bad guy if it meant saving the music and the people who made it. Art requires an architect like Henley and a maverick like Walsh, and at 77, Joe Walsh is just glad they're both still here to tell the story.